All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us as we launch today's webinar exploring some of the big questions around AI in K-12 education. My name is Kathleen Lane. I'm the Executive Director of the EdCan Network, and I'm pleased to be your host for today. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that this land that we call Canada is the traditional territories of the First Nations, the Métis, and the Inuit people who have stewarded and cared for this land for generations. I invite each of you to take a moment to reflect on your relationship to the land that you're joining from today. AI is a catalyst for change. It offers new possibilities for teaching and learning while simultaneously emphasizing different student competencies. As AI is transforming our society, teaching and assessment practices must adjust alongside it to meet the evolving needs of young people. Today, we're exploring questions like what types of learning experiences will be most relevant, and how do we embrace new ways of educating young people? Today's conversation is the third and final event in a series that EdCan is hosting in partnership with Engaged Ed by École Branchée and the DAIS. So the EdCan Network is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to connecting research and practice in K-12 education. We share emerging research, promising practices across jurisdictions, and we convene opportunities for educators to engage with each other to share what's working so that they can learn from their colleagues. And with that, I'll hand it over to Nicole to introduce École Branchée.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Kathleen. I'm so glad to be with you all today. A sincere thank you to the EdCan Network for organizing this series, and we're very proud to partner with EdCan as well as the DAIS on this initiative. Engage Learning, for those who might not be very familiar with us, we're with École Branchée. It's a Canadian nonprofit organization where we are a media supporting educators in the digital age since 1996. So this year we're celebrating our 30 years. Our mission is pretty simple: to empower teachers to inspire student success, because when one teacher grows, many students benefit. We share practical ideas, inspire classroom practices through our newsfeed. Our newsfeed is completely free, and I'll be sharing the link in the chat a bit later this morning or this afternoon. We also have a media, a magazine where we share different articles and different strategies for K-12, mostly K-12 education. And if you gave permission when registering for the session, you'll receive our free AI educator bundle with different tips and strategies for using AI in K-12 education. And if you're unsure whether you gave permission, you can always just update your preferences on the registration page. I'll be also sharing a series of bilingual articles, because today the session is in English. Tomorrow, EdCan is also hosting one in French. So we are publishing articles in both French and English, and those will be shared with you via email. And they are free, of course. So that's it for me. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. And over to you, Rajender.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Kathleen. Thanks, Nicole. Hi, everyone. So I'm Rajender. I'm joining from DAIS. We are a think tank based out of Toronto Metropolitan University, and our work is at the intersection of education, technology, and democracy. So there are a bunch of projects on the AI, labor market, and AI and creative force and all those sides. But specifically in K-12, we are very pleased to partner with the EdCan on this series, and also Nicole's team on this series, but also broader partnership with EdCan on our K-12 focused work. One of our flagship project is about advancing phone-free school policies across Canada. So we are hosting a webinar tomorrow for sort of like a best practices in bringing principals together as kind of a model examples, how they are putting it, practice it across Canada. So I'll share the link to that in the chat, but nice meeting everyone, and thanks for EdCan for advancing this conversation.
Absolutely. So this, as I mentioned, this is the third in a series of conversations we've had on artificial intelligence in K-12 education. We started with a conversation around how to use AI safely and effectively in our schools and school systems. When we were preparing for that, when we put together a short guidance document, just linking to the different frameworks for using AI in K-12 education. This was prepared in December. It's probably out of date already. There's been so much rapid advances in AI technology recently. But if you're still looking for starting points, that's a great one. Our second conversation that was held last month was around the competencies students are going to need to thrive in a world with AI. And today's conversation is really around how do we adjust our teaching and assessment practices to support our students. We will have time for questions at the end. You're also welcome to put them in the chat. We'll keep an eye on that as we go through so that we can try to answer them throughout our conversation. But without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our 4 panelists. I've asked each of them to share just a couple words about what inspired them to join today's conversation. So to begin with, Joelle Rodway is an associate professor at Ontario Tech University and is the founder and director of NetLab, Networks for Educational Transformation, a research lab that examines the role of social networks in mediating leadership and policy efforts for school and system improvement. In particular, Joelle focuses on professional learning networks and how the exchange of social capital facilitates and constrains knowledge mobilization in support of educational change. So Joelle, I'm sure you've got a lot going on in your work relating to AI right now. What inspired you to join?
Thanks so much for the invitation. So I'm at Ontario Tech University where I am surrounded by AI. We have a school of ethical AI, the Mindful AI Research Institute, lots of folks doing really interesting things in a wide variety of ways with AI. And that has inspired me alongside my colleagues in the Center for Digital Innovation and Education to explore this ourselves. So I took my interest in leadership and policy and brought that to the Ontario education system, where my focus over the past year has been really trying to understand the influence of AI, generative AI in particular, on educational policy making in K-12 public education systems. And it's been a very, very, very interesting ride, if I could use that as a colloquial way of describing the learning. It's a ride. It's up, down. It's like a roller coaster at Canada's Wonderland, but exciting.
Perfect. All right, Mohammed Etzataya is an assistant professor of digital pedagogies and technology literacies at the Faculty of Education at Brock University. He currently holds the Brock Chancellor's Chair for Teaching Excellence and is the president of the Technology and Teacher Education, a special interest group within the Canadian Society for the Study of Education. Mohammed's research focuses on educational technologies, teacher education, STEM education, and differentiated instruction. Mohammed, what's inspiring you at the moment?
Thank you, Kathleen, for the invitation, and thank you to the EdCan Network for organizing these sessions. As you said, my teaching and research are both focused on educational technologies broadly, and AI in education is the topic that everyone is discussing right now, whether in K-12 or in higher education. And we will talk more about that today. But in particular, this conference, this webinar is a great opportunity for us to connect with educators and colleagues from across Canada and listen to their perspectives on the matter. So glad to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And for those of you who joined us last month, you'll remember Sarah Rankin. Sarah leads the Center for Excellence for Digital Innovation with the New Brunswick Department of Education and Early Childhood Development, where she guides provincial work on AI, digital learning, and innovation in K-12. She's led system-wide guidelines for generative AI at the provincial level, large-scale pilots of AI tools, and organized groundbreaking events such as New Brunswick Digital Learning Summit and AI Think Tank that connect education with industry and community partners. Sarah, it's wonderful to have you back again this month. What's inspiring you at the moment?
I think what's inspiring me at the moment is one, just getting to continue this conversation. So thank you for having me back, firstly. I spend a lot of time being boots on the ground with teachers, putting this into their classrooms and working with them in the professional learning way. And I think that I'm just excited to kind of share what I'm hearing from them, what their concerns are, what they're struggling with, and hopefully I can be a bit of a voice for them today.
Wonderful, thank you. And finally, Caroline Roberts is the Assistant Superintendent of Learning Services for Foothills School Division. For the past 8 years, she has guided divisional priorities of engagement, support, and success across curriculum, instruction, assessment, professional learning, and a continuum of supports and services. Recognizing the transformative potential of emerging technologies, Caroline leverages artificial intelligence to scale effective practices, address complex challenges, and enhance decision-making. Caroline, what's inspiring you as you join today's conversation?
Well, good morning, everyone. I would say how we've approached it in our school authority is just looking at opportunities and possibilities of using AI in advancing student growth and achievement, and also like enhancing the professional practice of our teachers.
Beautiful. All right, so last month we talked about two types of skills students are going to need to develop to become contributing members of society. The bulk of the conversation focused on the transferable skills and competencies, sometimes called 21st century skills or global competencies, that students are going to need to succeed in a constantly evolving world. Things like critical thinking, creativity, curiosity, adaptability, resilience, human relational skills. These skills are not new, but rather AI is suddenly reinforcing the need to develop these skills. So if developing global competencies is an increasingly important aspect of education, how is that affecting teaching practices? And how can we help our students develop those skills? Joelle, I think I'm going to start with you for this one.
Wonderful. I mean, I would say in this context, and I'm thinking about this even as a teacher myself. So as we were chatting beforehand, I was saying I'm excited. I'm just preparing right now to teach a educational law, policy, and ethics class in the spring, and I'm really thinking about AI differently this year as I have in previous years, just because everything is changing, and I expect it. It showed up in my classes last year a little bit. I expect it to be fully present in my classes this year. And I think, what I would say with my own experiences as a researcher and a teacher here is everybody is showing up as a student. I really feel like there's too much discussion around teachers and students. And I think the best way forward here is for teachers, so people who do hold those responsibilities in schools, to be recognizing that they're also the learners. I can think of no better space, honestly, for to go into your classroom and say, like, I am also learning, and modeling all of those skills, modeling the types of questions that we need to be asking, modeling uh, ethical practice, and speaking that out loud. So in order to model that kind of failing forward, because I think if you're doing anything in AI, it's not always, there's like the easy answer, and then there's what actually happens when you really get into it. It's modeling that failing forward. But in order to do that, teachers need systems around them that allow them to do that. And I will say, studying policy right now in Ontario, I keep hearing people asking for that guidance because it's a very permission kind of based culture, and teachers are struggling. So I would say, in order for us to actually help our students develop those skills, we need systems that are helping the teachers develop those skills first. Because if we're not doing that, then a lot of teachers' responses is to just ban it, or to move away from it in fear. So I guess I have no idea how much time I have here, Kathleen, and I could ramble forever. But I guess what I would say is, how can we help our students develop those skills is by helping the teachers develop those skills. And
Beautiful.
we need to think of those two things being together and not separate.
Love that. Just reinforcing that interconnection, the learning it together, and the learning or teaching by modeling. Mohammed, why don't you add on to this?
Sure. I'm very pleased that we've settled to a foundation that we need more focus on the global competencies. Now the shift toward global competencies forces us to reconsider how we teach, what we're teaching, and why we're teaching in the first place. So when the outcomes we care about are critical thinking, adaptability, creativity, and all of those skills, content stops becoming the destination. It's now the vehicle instead. So this should really prompt us as educators and as curriculum designers to ask what content is actually worth keeping in our curriculum. What can AI now handle? what skills can students offload to AI and what skills must not be offloaded to AI at all. Now, related to this is also the concept of AI literacy. So not here's how we only use the tool, but the deeper question of when to use it, when not to use it, and uh, what it can do for us. And this is the new kind of critical thinking that needs to be in every classroom. Now, on the teacher's end, because we're talking here about the teaching practices, there's a lot that AI can take off teachers' plates. Certain type of content delivery, let's say practice, certain feedback loops, but there's also what has to remain deeply human in teaching, and this is mentorship, moral reasoning, and relational learning that happens when students struggle together. Now, with all of that, this leads me to the idea of interdisciplinarity, because real problems in our world don't come or arrive as pre-sorted by subject. So if we want our students to navigate complex problems, we need to give them the practice to do exactly that. They need to work across disciplines. They need to sit with ambiguity. They need to build solutions. And these solutions do not have a textbook answer. Now, so interdisciplinarity is key in the future classroom, I believe. Now, finally, the tension I keep coming back to is AI is a great tool at personalizing or individualizing learning through intelligent tutors, adaptive assessments, and all those tools. But education has never been about the individual only. The classroom is where students learn to think with each other, to think with their teachers. So as we bring AI in, we have to be intentional about not designing this piece out. We need to explore how student learning can flourish via AI and how to make the best out of human AI collaboration and human collaboration at the same time. So I'll end with that, and we'll definitely have more chances to elaborate.
Amazing. And then Sarah and then Caroline, as we move into your kind of reflections on this, you're also a little bit closer to the classroom and what this is looking like in practice. So Sarah, how about over to you? How are we adjusting our teaching practices to emphasize these 21st century or global competencies?
Well, I know what we've done in New Brunswick to address this is all of our curriculum skill descriptors are actually aligned to the global competencies. So if a teacher goes and opens up their curriculum document, they'll see next to it that whatever that skill is, it's got right next to it exactly what global competency it's tied to. So that for us has already been embedded across, which is really great. But when I think about, the teachers themselves, I think, Mohammed, you touched on something that was really important, which is this interdisciplinary piece that when we're talking about a technology like artificial intelligence, it's really all too easy sometimes for teachers to say, well, that's something that a technology teacher will talk about, or a physics teacher, or a mathematics teacher. In reality, we need to be having those conversations in every single content area and every single domain. And so then that begs the question of how do we upskill all of these teachers despite their content area, be they a kindergarten language arts teacher or a grade 12 physics teacher, to understand that teaching our students about the who, what, why, and where of artificial intelligence is now their responsibility as well. Something that we're currently working on to help teachers with addressing that is we're reevaluating our digital literacy framework here in New Brunswick. And it also is very closely tied to the global competencies. But something that we're adding into it is these modes of AI. So, what does learning look like in AI? So it's learning with artificial intelligence, but it's also learning about artificial intelligence. It's learning through AI, which Mohammed, you touched on with those smart tutors. I think something we need to be careful about with those is understanding that students need to have good judgment before they use some of those tools, before they can just accept what that smart tutor is saying, whether or not it's correct or not. But then there's also that piece of learning without AI. We still need to find those opportunities for our teachers and our students to set aside maybe the technology for a little bit and come back to that human connection and find that flow between the human and the technology and finding some sort of pattern that works in their classroom.
Beautiful. And then Caroline, how's this playing out within your school district?
Well, it's interesting because we approached AI as looking at it through possibilities and opportunities. And so we weren't quick to develop any administrative procedures or policies in regards to limiting or restricting or just limiting and restricting the use of AI. And so we are now in the process of kind of developing, realizing that need for those guidelines in using AI in learning and designing learning is important. And as well as creating kind of that vision and potential, procedures or policies to support that work and provide those guidelines. We use an instructional strategy of advancing student growth and achievement through deep and transferable learning. And so through that approach, which is what our focus on was prior to new curriculum implementation in support of design, is that around that conceptual understanding and living with those complex problems over time in that agency. And so that is a great connect to those global competencies. And as Sarah was saying, that it's already connected the competencies within their curriculum or program of studies. That's the case in Alberta as well. So we have already over a number of years been designing learning, not only around curricular outcomes, but deepening that understanding of those competencies. And so we also have always been reporting that out to our students in regards to deepening that. So that has been a great connect. I mean, we looked at a number of those, what graduates of this AI generation and those competencies that would be required. Well, there's the competencies outlined there are directly connected to the learning competencies we currently have. We have made that direct connect as we've been developing this framework and engaging all of our stakeholders around the question of how might we leverage AI to support deep and transferable learning while ensuring ethical and responsible use.
Amazing. So just reflecting back some of the key points that I heard, this need to build a framework, a system to support our education leaders to develop the skills and our educators in the classroom to develop new skills to model alongside the students, the need for interdisciplinary learning. And I love the deep transferable learning. I love that language, Caroline. I am seeing someone's hand up in the audience. If you could just put your question into the chat, we will get to that. But as you do that, I just want to invite the panelists to, if there's anything they wanted to add that someone else on the panel inspired you to mention. No additions? You've said everything? All right, so moving on to our next question. We know that AI is creating a need to change how we assess things in our classrooms. So Caroline, given that you are perhaps the closest to the classroom at the moment, what is changing in assessment practices in your division?
Sorry, I've struggled to unmute. So we saw this as an opportunity as we were implementing new curriculum to reflect again on what our assessment evaluation practices were within our system. And we've always within those guidelines, it's around that triangulation of data in regards to student learning. So with that, we then developed a new system of reporting to align with the new curriculum implementation. And that created opportunity for us in our professional learning around curriculum to focus on that assessment piece, as well as then how can we utilize AI in advancing student growth and achievement within that learning that transfers piece. And so in regards to assessment, we actually developed an AI agent because what we noticed is that when we assess our or asked our students and our parents in regards to what they needed to know about their child's learning, we knew that there was an opportunity to grow the professional practice of our teachers and communicating student learning. And so we created an agent called CART, which is a communication and reporting tool that then we have it's referenced and aligned with instructions that pull from our administrative procedures around assessment, evaluation, reporting. It's connected to our curriculum, and so it is a tool that we can use to grow the practice of communicating student learning. And more effectively align that communication, that it's consistent and the quality is there. Yeah, so anyway, that's how we're using AI and actually looking at it and aligning with curriculum implementation and our instructional design.
Beautiful. All right, let's go back to you, Sarah.
So something that I was thinking about when I was reflecting on this was my work with the Centers of Excellence for Digital Innovation really is rooted in some of our industry and post-secondary partnerships. And the assessment piece, often I think we feel like it has to be done by the teacher or there has to be some sort of peer assessment, but I do feel like we're missing an opportunity for professional evaluators, for industry to play a role in guiding our students through that process of learning as well and giving them some feedback. So I think that that's something that we need to start exploring too, is how do we get our industry partners into our classrooms, helping students really understand the skills that they are going to need to be successful in life after K-12. I also think too about in New Brunswick, we talk a lot about triangulation of formative assessment data. And I think we've missed the mark sometimes on how important formative assessment is. And I think right now, especially, it has become so critical to develop good formative assessment for learning. Um, for us in New Brunswick, it's conversation, observation, and product. Those are the three things that we collect when we're thinking about formative assessment data. The product one, we need to have a big conversation about that because that final product is not enough anymore, especially if AI can do it all and it can build that product very easily, then what do we really need to measure? Is it the end product or is it how you got to that product? And with conversation and observation, I tell teachers all the time that those are currently two things that it's really difficult for students to AI. It's really hard to fake a conversation when you're standing right in front of your teacher or a peer. It's really hard to AI what you're doing in the classroom, your work habits, and what the students are doing to get from point A to point B in their learning. So I think there's some really important stuff we need to go back and relook at and refocus on as far as formative assessment data collection goes. I also think of the role that AI can have in some of that conversations. Can AI chatbot conversations be an example of formative assessment data? Absolutely, in my opinion. We have some great tools that we're using in New Brunswick that allow students to interact and chat with bots that are kept within sort of a virtual walled garden. And the outputs of those are really informative and sometimes more informative than what an essay could ever tell us.
Fantastic. And Mohammed, I think this relates to some of your scholarship.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. You kind of went over most of my points,
I'm sorry.
especially especially in terms of the differentiation between the product and the process. This is a great point. But I'll circle back to my answer regarding the curriculum and the teaching question, because I see the teaching and the assessment as complementary for sure. Because we said we're serious about developing critical thinking, adaptability, and creativity. So we cannot keep assessing students as if recalling content is the main goal. So the assessment must match the teaching and learning that we just discussed earlier. And we know when a student can generate a very decent essay in 30 seconds, a take-home writing assignment isn't really assessing their writing skills anymore. So we either redesign the assessment or we're kind of measuring the wrong thing. Yeah, now in terms of practical measures in terms of assessment, we will probably need more performance-based authentic assessments in the classrooms, tasks that are messy, open-ended. They are rooted in real contexts, which also bring me back to the interdisciplinary concept earlier. So if the teaching is interdisciplinary, the assessment has to address this interdisciplinarity. So instead of, let's say, write an essay about climate change, we need to bring a real policy problem or a real problem and ask the students to recommend a solution. And while they are working on the product, they are learning and they are elaborating on their learning. So AI can help the student research, but it cannot do all the thinking for them. Now, this also raises the harder question about what we are grading, because grading is also an important piece, and grade inflation is now under the radar as well. Now, if AI can produce a very polished product, then the final product cannot tell us a lot, as Sarah mentioned. We need to weight the conversation, the iterations, the reflections, and all of that. Students need to defend their positions. They need to take a piece of AI generated work if they did, and they need to critique it, to improve it. And those are the skills that matter, and those are the skills that are much harder to fake compared to the final product. So yeah, it is an uncomfortable truth. AI is not just disrupting teaching, but it is also exposing how much of our assessments are not really measuring what we said they are. And one final point is we also need to be mindful of different modalities. Now, I know this may apply more to higher education um, compared to K to 12, but certain modalities are also more vulnerable to these issues. I can think of online courses, for example, and many of my courses are online, and those are to a certain extent more vulnerable because we cannot observe students in the same way that we can do that in person. So AI is really forcing us to reconsider. And when we even think about asynchronous online courses, that's even also a more difficult question to answer. So all of those are questions now we're currently struggling with and trying to navigate. And none of us has the correct answer yet. I don't think there is a correct answer anyway, but all of those are the dilemmas that we are navigating.
Absolutely. And Joelle, I know you're exploring this at the systems level. So what would you add?
As I'm listening to my colleagues, my brain tends to work in images, and so what's coming to my mind as I've been thinking about this is, one time I took a long flight and I had a health issue come up, and they heard that I had done this long flight, and they're like, okay, we're going to need some contrast and imaging to make sure that there's no pulmonary embolism. I mean, it was all good in the end, but stick with me. So I had to go have, the contrast dye injected into your system, and you have the MRI. I see AI as being the dye that's being put into that system that's highlighting the weak spots that have always existed in our systems. So when we're getting down to the root of things, oh, assessment, conversation forever. I mean, I went to school with a good old card catalog. You wanted to find something in the library, you pulled out the drawer, the Dewey Decimal System. So I've been through lots of change, over my lifespan, and conversations, because at the heart of learning, the same things still apply, right? And to build on something Mohammed just said, I wrote it down, the uncomfortable truth that our assessments weren't assessing what we thought it was assessing. The die for me that AI is casting in the system is it's really exposing in like fluorescent highlighting where we have made false assumptions about the how our systems work, the capacity of our system, the capacity of the people working within the system. So even in this conversation, we're talking about assessment, design, modality, all of the sort of like teaching skills, like I wrote in my notes, pedagogical skills, assessment literacy, all like AI literacy, digital literacy is built on all these foundational knowledge and skills that I think we often assume exist. And they do exist broadly, like as a collective, they do. But when we start looking at this individually, it's highly differentiated. So I think a challenge for school system, and the bigger the system, because we haven't talked about that, there are a lot of inequities baked into this. So if you live where I live, which is around the GTA, just in the suburbs of Toronto, all the big school districts are talking about it. But when you start moving into more rural areas, there are school districts in Ontario where this isn't even on their radar. They simply just don't have the capacity and resources. They want to, but it's being pushed out by competing priorities, right? Mm-hmm. So I think to go back to my analogy, it's like what I think we have to ask ourselves, what are the assumptions that we are operating within this space, and challenge ourselves with those and look at our data, have conversations, look at our own, I would call it COP squared, right? So conversations, observations, process, and product, right? And what does that look like at a system level? What does that look like at a school level? What does that look like at a classroom level, at a teacher-student dyad level? And really be asking ourselves and doing that needs assessment. And I would concur with Sarah here on this. I think working in partnership with outside organizations, whether that's folks like me, I'm currently working with the Council of Directors of Education in Ontario as an outsider point of view, credentialed evaluators. I know I have lots of colleagues that do that kind of work. Whatever EdCan, like whatever that group is, to kind of shake up the snow globe a little bit and help us have conversations where we could see where those fluorescent fissures are in our system. Because I don't actually really see AI as being different from anything else that's come into the system and disrupted and caused any change, except in the fact that it has leveled it. So the people with the highest level of system responsibility are struggling in very similar ways to people that are in classrooms. But it's moving so fast, and it's such a powerful wave that I don't think we can bury it the way that we have buried other things. In the past, we've said, yeah, we did that. We've brought in the global, like we're focusing on communication. Yeah, creativity is there. And we kind of have and we haven't at the same time. And I don't think that AI is going to be forgiving. I think it is going to be the contrast that stains our skin. So whether we want to deal with it or not, that's probably a bad analogy, but it says more about me. But do you know what I mean? We can't get away from this one. So in that way, I actually think in my work as I'm going through the process, it's a really good thing because it is forcing us to sit in the discomfort that we have been burying. And I'll just close and I'll save this to the end, but this is sort of my preview. There's a lot of warts. AI comes with a lot of warts, and it is not neutral. It is a machine that comes with a lot of problems. So we can't ignore that either. So at a systems level, we need to figure out what are the assumptions we have as we're building these systems, and how can we develop our systems differently? I'm hearing a lot of folks trying to plug and play AI in an existing system that those fluorescent lines are showing has always been broken. Mm-hmm. So, Joelle, or not functioning equitably. So how can we, I know you're playing the music. How can we deal with that as we're grappling in this context as well?
Yeah, you're actually providing a really great segue into my next question. AI is here. It's perhaps the biggest disruptor we've seen in a long time in education. It's advancing so rapidly. It's already good at providing differential instruction. It's becoming a really great teacher in many ways. It's also really good at allowing students to pretend they've learned something. They can sign up Einstein for the online course, and Einstein will do the course for them. So it's like it's got this huge piece here. But one of the things I do wonder is as AI becomes better as an instructor, is there the possibility that if we just try and insert AI into an existing system without addressing any of these friction points that we're acknowledging already exist, can AI replace teachers? So Sarah, I'm going to start with you for this one.
So one is that I think it will only do that if the teacher in the system allows it to. We have to recognize the power that we have both as an education system, but also as teachers. I had a conversation not too long ago with the teacher about basically this very thing where she felt that, is it going to replace me and my role? I'm worried about my students, their critical thinking skills getting kind of overdone by AI. I don't want them to lose those skills. And I said, well, don't let them. It's your classroom. You're the teacher at the front of the room or back of the room or wherever you're standing that day. If it was me in the classroom, I was usually running in circles. So don't let it, kind of to Joelle's point, it is a tool that we can use to improve our system and to learn great things. But like so many tools in the wrong hands, it can be very dangerous as well. I've used the hammer analogy, which is not a great analogy, but I've used that with teachers before, that a hammer is a tool and it can build great things. And especially if you know how to use it, if you're a skilled carpenter, you can build a beautiful home for somebody who's in need. But in the hands of somebody who doesn't know how to use it right, or maybe isn't prepared to use it, it becomes a weapon. They could hurt themselves, they could hurt somebody else intentionally or unintentionally. So we do need to be thinking about that. The other thing and this is kind of going back a little bit again to what Mohammed and Joelle both said about, it's exposing these cracks that we have in our system. And something that I keep, this is my Roman Empire. It was like what's your Roman Empire? What do you think about? And I'm going to put it actually in the chat, because this blog post, if I can paste it here, there we go, is my Roman Empire. I think about this blog article probably once or twice a day about this concept of pedagogical debt that we are now being forced to pay up on. So if you're not familiar with Punya Mishra's work, he's an amazing, amazing leader in the educational technology field. But he talks about this in this article, that we are now basically seeing the cracks in the system, and AI is just making us have a really hard look at ourselves as an educational system. I akin it to the highways. For a long time, it's you fill in the pothole, we just patch it, and we'll fix the whole thing later on. But we're now at a point where we can't just keep patching the holes. We really need to have a hard look. And, can we gut the system for a little bit and rebuild ourselves up? Well, education is a 10-month thing here in New Brunswick. So we only have 2 months in the summer to try and re-gut this whole thing. It's a hard job. So I don't think AI is going to replace anybody unless we don't fix the system, unless we don't step up and say we have to empower our teachers to make sure that they know what role they're playing in this digital age and how important it is that they're literally the heart of education. They are the one that can help a kid out and can talk to them when they are in crisis, that they can work through difficult tasks with the kid that an AI may not be able to do that. And we need to make sure that kids aren't turning to AI for some of those things. The concerns around parasocial relationships that our students are developing with AIs because they don't feel comfortable enough to go to an adult when they're struggling. We really need to be careful about that as well.
Really good points to think about. Mohammed, from your perspective.
Honestly, it depends on what you think teachers are for. So if teaching is a set of functions, like technical ones, transmission of content, explaining concepts, answering questions, providing feedback, then yes, intelligent tutors, adaptive assessments can do a lot of that, and they do it well. And we are still at the beginning. So they are expected to do much better in the future. AI doesn't get tired, it's patient, it can personalize in very effective ways. But education is not the same thing as instruction. And the teacher is not a content delivery system, you know. Uh, Instruction is a technical act, but education is more of a human one. It involves noticing when your student is disengaged and knowing why. You need to establish this trust between the teacher and the kids in the classroom. It also involves modeling, which was mentioned earlier today. It asks us to be curious, to be wrong, to do it all over again. All of those are things that algorithms cannot really replace. So teachers are beyond being only content transmitters. They know their students, they know their stories, they meet them wherever they are. And this is not a technical function, this is more of a relationship. And the pandemic really gave us a live experiment. We had technology, we had content, we had platforms. Now, I know with certain variations in terms of access, but all of this, even in places where we had access, it wasn't enough. We had students, even those who had access to technology, to content. It was the human relationships that were missing, and the achievement gaps widened, and we know mental health deteriorated and engagement collapsed. So it's not because that the tools failed, it's just because the human infrastructure wasn't there. And this is what makes education more meaningful, more sustainable. So just to circle back to your question, AI tools can replace some of what the teachers do, but they wouldn't replace what teachers are for their students, in a nutshell.
Love that. Love the language of human infrastructure as well. Caroline, in your experience within the school district, both building on through the pandemic and now with the advent of generative AI, what's your perspective on whether or in which ways AI can replace or complement teachers?
So one of my team members, this is their quote, and they say artificial intelligence can personalize learning, only human teachers can humanize it. And so as we're, engaging all of our stakeholders in the development of this framework, we use that quote quite regularly. And it is really, we have approached AI as an opportunity and a tool to really not to obviously replace teachers, but really enhance their practice and enhance learning. So, there is like I said, a connect to that instructional model that we have with that deep and transferable learning and that focus on, designing critical challenges and living with complex problems over in time. And I think then there's that direct connect to designing through those competencies. I think that is what humanizes it rather than when we think about just, outcomes or curricular outcomes, which is more that instructional piece, that design pieces is and how we, support students, in that learning and social emotionally and developing those competencies really emphasizes the importance of that human piece to learning.
Beautiful. All right, and over to you, Joelle.
Keep coming up last, so having to think of things as at the end of the group. I do, my blunt answer to the question is no, it can't replace teachers. My follow-up question is along the same as, or statement is what Mohammed was saying, but that depends on how you define teaching. So if you're like the pour water into an empty cup kind of teaching philosophy, then yeah, probably bad news. It's going to replace you in terms of content delivery. But everything that we know about learning is that it's fundamentally a social practice. And I think at the end of the day, what we need to remember is that AI is a machine. So the way that we represent AI in our classrooms, the way that we talk about it, the more we humanize AI, the more we're moving people away from understanding what it really is. Had a conversation recently with my daughter, my younger daughter, who will be 14 this weekend. She uses AI. My son won't touch it because he's in grade 11 and he's frightened to death. People, like the teachers are making him put everything through Turnitin, and I'm staying silent about that, even though what I know about Turnitin, they're doing their best. They're using it anyway, right? Like a lot of these kids are using it anyway. We have to figure out how to build our own competency in using AI in ways that make sense for what we are assessing. This is not an either or type of scenario, right? So I'm currently engaged in this process in my own course design. And I think this moving away from this notion of teaching has this very sort of top-down linear kind of implication to it. To designing is a different idea when you're thinking, and designing brings in notions of creativity, right? Brings in all, so once we start asking questions about that, I think it shifts our gaze in how we're thinking about what we're doing with our work. And that's where I think AI can be an assistive tool, but not necessarily a replacement. And I would argue that if you're using it as a replacement, then you're using it wrong and you're probably not good at what you're doing. Another uncomfortable truth, right? So again, going back to this idea about needing to understand yourself and what you know. So when I asked my daughter, how does ChatGPT work? Do you know? No clue. And as soon as I explained that to her, she immediately was like, oh, I need to start thinking about this then. And I'm like, right. Because she's thinking of it as a magic machine. She's not thinking of it as, how it actually works. And I think having those conversations explicitly will help us reframe the work of teachers, but it's not going to replace good teaching and learning.
Yeah. That's so true. Hearing throughout all of today's conversation, the deeply human aspect of learning, of education, the importance of recognizing it as a social process, that AI is a tool that we can use that can support us in different aspects of the work. However, we have to build those, processes around it. We have only a couple of minutes left. I would like each of you in 30 seconds or less, so this is a challenge sometimes, in 30 seconds or less, what is kind of one key thing that we should be thinking about over the coming months? We know that this is the start. We've barely scratched the surface of this conversation, and we know with the pace of change in AI technology, we're going to be having this conversation for a long time and in different ways. So just when you're ready, when you've collected your thoughts on that one takeaway, you can just unmute yourself. I'm not sure who'd like to go first.
I'll jump in. I'll do it. I think we need to be empowering our teachers to, one, feel comfortable enough to actually go and explore AI and all technologies so that they don't feel like it's a taboo subject. They don't feel like it's something they need to be scared of and avoid. They need to be empowered to go and explore, but they also need to empower to innovate and to think differently and step outside the box. So we need to be building a system where our teachers feel like they can do that and that they're not tied or locked into something, or that their position is at risk because they tried something a little outside the box. So teacher empowerment.
Beautiful. All right, Mohammed, looks like you're ready.
Yeah, I think we need to embrace uncertainty and confront maybe very difficult questions about the future of teaching, learning, assessment, curriculum, and all of those very difficult questions. I think I agree with Joelle. I think she mentioned this. This is a rare opportunity to rethink education at its core. So I hope we will take this opportunity.
Caroline or Joelle?
I can jump in.
Joelle, go ahead. Yeah.
I think the last point I'd like to make is that sophisticated use of AI depends on a high level of knowledge and expertise in the area in which you're using it as an educator. So how are we developing that sophisticated depth of knowledge and expertise that's going to enable and empower our educators to play safely, to experiment, to remain curious, to do all of those things, and to use AI in a way that is ethical and builds upon that expertise, contributes to that expertise, and not as a way to deal with overwork, burden, and system constraints.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. All right, and Caroline, you get the last word today.
Yeah, I would just say about, realizing that it is a tool and that we can use it to enhance learning, but that really that teachers and students remain at the center of learning.
Beautiful. All right, so thank you, everybody. Oh my goodness, to our panelists, thank you for sharing your wisdom and expertise with us today. There is so much to think about as we deepen our collective knowledge of AI and how it can enhance education and what we need to be thinking about so that it does indeed enhance education. Today was the final webinar in this series. If you'd like to stay in touch, we do invite you to sign up for our newsletter. Send us an email, absolutely. We can connect you. You've already got in the chat with École Blanchet and the DAIS, some of their upcoming events. So with that, I am going to stop the recording and we'll give the audience a chance to ask any questions.